While I don't find it very likely the Lakers make a trade prior to training camp, if they would make one, I probably would look to trade Gabe Vincent. I mean, looking at their current rotation, pretty much everyone feels a bigger need for their rotation than Gabe Vincent does. Pointing to a guy like Rui Hachimura, for example, is one of, if not their best three-point shooter, definitely the one that'll get above 20 minutes per game in my opinion. Pointing to a guy like Austin Reeves is kind of their third scoring option, another ball handling option for their team, and simply a versatile offensive option. DeAndre Ayton or Jackson Hayes filling up their center rotation. Even a guy like Maxi Kleber fills a power forward center hybrid role for their rotation, something that nobody else can really fill on their current team. Jake LaRavia having the potential to be kind of their only 3-and-D wing option, at least their bigger 3-and-D wing option. Then for Marcus Smart, he kind of overtook the role that Gabe Vincent filled for their team last season, being that best point of attack defender off the bench for their team, probably their best screen navigator, another backup ball handler for their team, and a guy that simply fills that backcourt kind of two-way role for their team off the bench. He does that better than Gabe Vincent can. And while that's not to say I don't like Gabe Vincent, not to say that he can't offer their team anything and that he's completely useless, if we're pointing to him, I probably would point to his contract as more valuable asset than what he would offer in their rotation, meaning that I think his contract could give them a better upgrade than him and what he can offer in their rotation compared to a different player. So with that in mind here, we're going to talk about exactly that. Go through a few trades that could find them an upgrade for Gabe Vincent, finding them a player that could actually add more to their rotation, maybe a more versatile defensive option, maybe a better offensive option, simply a better two-way player in general, something their team definitely needs more of in my opinion. We're going to look for that and go through 3 of them in today's video. So without further ado here, starting with trade number 1, this kind of being the baseline trade for me and probably one that wouldn't take much for them to get. This being a trade with the Brooklyn Nets, a team they recently made a trade with, or at least during the past year now, that being the Dorian Finney-Smith trade for D'Angelo Russell. And we're going to look to trade for a player that they just traded for, that being Haywood Highsmith. And yes, he is recovering from an injury, or rather an off-season surgery, is expected to be back at the middle of October or maybe the end of it, so if he would miss time, it wouldn't be very much of it. And I think he would be a better option for the rotation than Gabe Vincent for a multitude of reasons. One of which being the fact that he's simply a better 3-and-D option. Compared to Vincent, who is under a 35% career 3-point shooter, Haywood Highsmith is a 37% career 3-point shooter, even a better corner 3-point shooter, shooting roughly 41% from the corner on his career, coming off 2 seasons in a row of shooting 44% from the corner, so definitely a more reliable 3-point shooting option. Then is a better and more versatile defensive option too. Whether you're talking about the eye test or from a numbers standpoint, coming off a season of having a defensive BPM rating of plus 0.9, also having a career rating of plus 0.8. This is compared to Vincent, who has one of under 1, actually having a negative 0.1 defensive BPM rating. Not bad, but also not very good, kind of pointing to him being average or at least not a great defensive playmaking option, which Haywood Highsmith is better than him at. If you're talking about takeaways and steals per game, isn't the best defensive playmaker, but a little bit better than Gabe Vincent, averaging 1.3 steals per 36 last season, also is a pretty good pass deflector. And then simply talking about defense and his ability to defend multiple positions, this would be the big upgrade here with Haywood Highsmith. Compared to Vincent, who is limited to guarding 1s and smaller 2s, Haywood Highsmith can guard 1s, 2s, 3s, and sometimes even 4s at times too. That being his ability and probably his best overall ability, defensive versatility, and simply his ability to defend multiple positions. Then combine that with the 3-point shooting ability, the corner 3-point shooting ability, being a good off-the-ball player, a hard worker in general, and I definitely would like that trade, and I think it would be an upgrade compared to Gabe Vincent. And while it definitely wouldn't take much to get him, with the Nets not really having a need for him and him not being a part of their long-term future, I imagine they'd be willing to part with him for maybe a 2nd-round draft pick, after they got a 2nd-round draft pick to simply take his contract, then trading him for another 2nd-round draft pick, and with an expiring contract like Gabe Vincent that they could probably flip again at the trade deadline, this would be a beneficial trade for them to make. So if that could be an option for them, I definitely would be open to it. Yes, again, he might miss training camp and maybe the early portion of the regular season, but they have a pretty good backup plan with Dalton Connect to fill his spot for that time frame, even again if he would miss any time, which he probably isn't expected to. then I think overall he'd be an upgrade over Gabe Vincent and potentially could be worth it too. Though if you wanted a little bit more of an upgrade and a guy that could maybe offer their team a bit more than Haywood Highsmith, then maybe I'd look to a guy like Matisse Thybulle. A guy we've talked about here on the channel before, currently playing for the Portland Trailblazers and likely doesn't have a long-term fit with their team. You know, kind of being replaced in their rotation last season, with him missing a bunch of time and not really playing that much, only playing in 15 total games, and therefore has kind of been replaced by guys like Shaedon Sharpe, Scoot Henderson, Deni Avdija, even now newly acquired Jrue Holiday, so there might not be a big place for him and not a big spot in the rotation for Matisse Thybulle going forward, which could very likely lead to a trade with him. And well, if they would make a trade for Gabe Vincent and maybe take a combination of Vincent with some draft compensation, I would be very interested in it. Maybe something like Gabe Vincent with a future first round draft pick swap, maybe their 2032 second round draft pick with it. I would be pretty interested in that. Yes, again, he only played 15 games last season, but I'm not worried about his durability going forward. On average before that, had played about 65 games per year, so I think it was simply a one-off thing for him. Only 28 years old, so it's not a declining thing with him. He's not getting old and therefore has become injury prone. I'm not too worried about it. And apart from that, he still remains a terrific defender when healthy. Probably a top 5 defender in the entire league in regard to wing defense and taking on point of attack matchups. Matisse Thybulle is very good and is a very good defensive playmaker too. Last season, for example, averaging 2.2 steals per game in only 21 minutes per game. I mean, per 36 minutes, that's nearly 4 of them. Not to mention averaging over 1 block per 36 minutes to go along with it. Is a great defensive on-ball player, is a off-ball defender, is a defensive pest out there, passing lanes, on-ball, off-ball defense. Matisse Thybulle does it all out there, and has quietly become a decent 3-point shooter too. Last season, again, in only 15 games, but he did shoot 44% from 3 in that time frame, taking 3.2 of them per game in 21 minutes per game. That's actually fairly high volume and actually showing improvement with him, taking 5.5 of them per 36 minutes, not to mention in the past 3 years now shooting above 36% from 3, which is actually above league average and pointing to his improvement again. I definitely would be interested in hearing Matisse Thybulle. I mean, from that standpoint, he's been a better 3-point shooter and defender than Gabe Vincent in really each of the past 3 years now. So if we're making a trade for him and it really wouldn't take that much, again, maybe a first round draft pick swap and then maybe a second round draft pick, I think that would be worth it and definitely enough to call him an upgrade over Gabe Vincent in their rotation. Being more versatile defensively, having the ability to take on tougher and not to mention more defensive matchups, being just as, if not a better 3-point shooter, so I definitely like the option of Matisse Thybulle if we're getting him over Gabe Vincent. However, if neither one of Haywood Highsmith or Matisse Thybulle are available, or if we simply want to go after a bigger trade target and potentially somebody more glamorous, I guess, on the trade market, then maybe a guy like Ayo Dosunmu could be an option. Yes, he is a younger option that probably isn't as available compared to those two, but if he could be had on the trade market and potentially for a good price, only trading Gabe Vincent with draft compensation to get him, I definitely would be interested. Potentially for a package like Gabe Vincent with 2 future first round draft pick swaps. You know, maybe a rebuilding team like Chicago would find interest in that and find value with that. You know, I'm really not sure what they want and what their future is at this point. I'm not even sure if they know at this point, but if they would take that trade and that kind of trade package, maybe even a second round draft pick included with it, then I would make that trade. I mean, whether you're talking about offense or defense, he would be an upgrade over Gabe Vincent in my opinion. Defensively, they're pretty close, but when locked in and when actually committed to playing defense, which he normally is, I would assume he's a pretty good defender. Then offensively, he'd be a big time upgrade in my opinion. Whether you're talking about scoring ability, playmaking ability, 3-point shooting, I think he'd be better than Gabe Vincent, and not to mention both of Matisse Thybulle and Haywood Highsmith too. Being the much better scoring option, coming off a season of averaging 12.3 points per game in roughly 30 minutes per game, does have untapped potential if given a bigger role on offense or maybe to lead the team coming off the bench offensively. I think he could have 6 man of the year type of potential, or even in the starting lineup could be a 3rd or 4th option, likely more of a 4th option, but is a pretty good scoring threat nonetheless. Then as a 3-point shooter, is a 36.1% career 3-point shooter, also a pretty good corner 3-point shooter, being a 37.1% from the corner, and all around is a good offensive option, can score at the rim, can score in the in-between game from the 3-point line, all around a pretty crafty player, and then with the defense and being a committed defender, not to mention is 6'5", so can defend point guards, shooting guards, and even smaller wing players too, I would definitely have interest here in Ayo Dosunmu. Then to kind of top it off, he would fit the Luka Doncic timeline, quote unquote, only 25 years old and does have untapped potential, while still being very productive at this current moment. I really like Ayo Dosunmu, and he'd probably be my favorite trade target that could be swapped with Gabe Vincent. But with all of that being said, I'd definitely be fine with any one of Ayo Dosunmu, Matisse Thybulle, or Haywood Highsmith in exchange for Gabe Vincent. Yes, it would take some kind of draft compensation, very little for Haywood Highsmith in my opinion, probably a first round draft pick swap at the absolute most here, maybe even as little as a second round draft pick, or for Matisse Thybulle would take a little bit more but also not that much. Then for the pinnacle being Ayo Dosunmu, probably would take at a bare minimum of 2 future first round draft pick swaps, maybe even a protected first round draft pick, but even with that, I would have interest in if they can find a way to upgrade from Gabe Vincent, adding more offense and or defense from him, I would have interest in doing it, not from that I don't like Gabe Vincent, but simply from the fact that he doesn't feel a direct need for their team at this current moment, and if they can upgrade from him, then I definitely would not hesitate to do so. So with that being said, what do you guys think? Who would be your favorite trade target in exchange for Gabe Vincent? Is it somebody that I mentioned in this video, or maybe a player that I didn't mention? And if it is, be sure to leave it in the comments down below. But I think that'll pretty much do it for this one. And if you enjoyed the video, then I'll greatly appreciate it if you dropped a like, subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and hit that notification bell to never miss out when I upload a video. But as always, thank you for watching and have a great day or night.